This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 19th of March 2024 at home in Wicklow, and it is an episode about vulnerability. Not a very long episode. I tried to keep it a bit shorter than normal, but I just touch on some of my own experiences of vulnerability, how I think about it, and I try to contextualise that. I find opportunity to talk about the HBO series Euphoria and look at aspects of that might tip into a discussion of vulnerability, particularly if you're a parent. And I also, at the end of the episode, talk about a photo shoot that I was involved in recently. And I read something I wrote as a response to that photo shoot, and that touches on vulnerability as well. I did want to I had some thought that I wanted to talk about Olaf. Olaf from the Disney movie Frozen. If you're a person of a certain age and have a child of a certain age, or a niece or nephew of a certain age, you've surely seen Frozen. And Olaf is fundamentally he's the clown archetype, but he's a perpetually optimistic, maybe unrealistically optimistic snowman. And there's a scene in Frozen, the first Frozen movie, where he comes face to face with an ice monster who is terrifying and huge and hell-bent on destruction. And they have an exchange a little bit later in the film where the ice monster just suddenly appears, and Olaf is like, yeah, I was just talking about you, and yeah, all good things. And just the way Olaf said that, all good things, had me thinking about this idea of no one wants to know. They don't want to know about the vulnerability. They just want all good things. Just keep it light and breezy. And I'm just not able to do that, am I? But if you're a regular listener, you know that, and you're not going to hold that against me. And yet, I see myself as Olaf. I am Olaf often. That's in me. But I don't think I'm Olaf here very much. So deal with that as you may. Okay, I'll see you around the corner. Cheers.
Not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind, keep my emoji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. I hope this finds you well. Thank you for choosing this podcast over the very many others you could have chosen. I'm very grateful to have your ears, to have a moment of your mind to take in whatever this is I'm about to offer you. Brevity is the soul of wit. They say. Or it has been said. It's probably from Shakespeare, is it? Who knows? Anyway, brevity is not my strong suit. And brevity is not, it's not speed. It's shortness. It's keeping it brief. And that is something that I appear to be singularly incapable of. But I am going to try to make this episode of the pod historically short. Not in the history of all podcasts, or indeed in the history of the world, but in the history of my own podcast. I'm going to see if I can bring this in at about half the length of a normal episode. So let's see. It's going to force me to try and be a bit more concise and perhaps more coherent It'll force me to try and stay on track. And that is not something I enjoy doing, because I like to go where the thoughts lead me. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a selling point of what I do here on the pod. But I'm on the clock, and yeah, I'm just going to try and keep it on point. Now, I have a few things rattling around this cranium of mine, and they may not gel together, but let's see. So fundamentally, what I want to talk about today is the idea of vulnerability. Vulnerability. What does that look like? Is that something that resonates with you? If I say, do you feel vulnerable? Are you vulnerable? What is your vulnerability scale looking like at the moment? Or do you roll your eyes? Do you think, oh, for God's sake, Jesus, will you give it a rest? I don't, because I think we don't always want to face into our vulnerability. We don't want to face into how that makes us feel. We don't want to look in that mirror and go, yeah, I feel really vulnerable. I feel afraid, because vulnerability and fear are they're bedfellows, surely. They are surely two things that know each other extremely well. Because how do we recognize vulnerability if not by sensing threat, or sensing the proximity of danger, and feeling like perhaps we are not in the best position to defend ourselves? So there has to be, danger detection or threat detection does not necessarily equate to fear. Certainly, if I drop in the martial arts context, when you fight in martial arts, the danger is right in front of you and can come from many different places within a repertoire of techniques and strategies with which you are probably familiar if you're a practitioner. And fear management is part of the deal. You have to, once you go into that engagement, fear isn't going to serve you very well. Now, it's not about being reckless. It's not about rushing headlong into the fight. Although some people do try to compensate for their fear that way. I believe some people don't feel it. I believe some people don't experience fear in that context. That, for some people, the competitive desire trumps everything, and some people are very accepting of physical pain or discomfort or impact, and it doesn't trigger a fearful reaction. It can trigger vigilance. It can trigger a desire to move quickly. But I believe that's another. That mindset is out there, and maybe that person might not have physical fear, but they might feel fearful if you ask them to talk about their feelings or express themselves emotionally. That might be challenging. I'm not someone who lives without fear. I was never someone who practiced karate or went into any sort of sparring or competitive sparring situation without a certain element of fear that I feel is healthy. As a performer, actors' nerves that's a version of fear. Fear of fear of being terrible. Fear of forgetting, your lines. Fear of forgetting what you're meant to do. Fear of just falling right out of the whole thing live on stage in front of people. Fear of just not delivering. So fear, I mean, it's definitely part of the package if we talk about vulnerability. I mean, I'd hesitate to believe that anyone is a stranger to vulnerability. And it's a bit like the happiness myth. The idea that anyone can be happy all the time, the way that's being packaged and sold to us relentlessly for generations. Happiness is such a product, and anyone who presents as if they are in that state all the time, I'm profoundly suspicious of them. I distrust it. Just as I've said many times on the pod, just the way I distrust a lot of stuff that's presented online and how people present themselves in online spaces, and particularly in the wellness sector. I don't buy it, and the more someone pushes that side of themselves, I think there's a proportional end to that line or that spectrum that is very fearful and very vulnerable. And my position always is, well, can you be somewhere in the middle and present it calmly, present all of yourself calmly and dispassionately and openly, with a healthy disregard for how you're perceived, a healthy disregard for appearances, a healthy disregard for the aesthetic, and just go, this is where I'm at. I mean, I try to do this consistently on the pod here, and I try to walk a line where I only ever implicate myself, because I mean, there's there are people close to me who don't care to be involved in this experiment of mine, this long running experiment of personal excavation and sharing. And that's challenging, because I've cultivated a comfort zone with honesty, and I've cultivated a comfort zone with emotional honesty, and that there's a vulnerability to that, and I don't love it. I don't always love talking about my internal life, and sometimes I make myself uncomfortable with it in spite of what I've just said, and yet I feel it's healthy, and I feel that I benefit from it, and I feel that people who are experiencing similar things, who find themselves listening to this stuff and listening to me when I talk about it, I think they benefit from it as well, because they don't feel like they're insane or they're mad for maybe having a similar experience or going through similar periods of self-doubt or emotional vulnerability or whatever it might be. And that's a version of advocacy from my side of things, and it's also a version of trying to walk a certain walk and not just talk the talk. And for my part on this topic, I'd say on one level, I've probably never felt more vulnerable in my life, and it's ever present. It just feels like it's a constant at the moment, and I find it very challenging, and it is an emotional vulnerability, and it is, it does reside in the area of being, loved and valued, and there's a frightening absence of those kind of beliefs or convictions in my life at the moment. That's what it feels like to me. And certainly I'm at a time in my life, having turned 50 at the start of the year, where I am pitching into this sort of this headspace of what have I done, and what have I to do, and how much time is there left to do it, and how well or poorly equipped am I to achieve lots of different things. And if you don't know me, you go, oh well, tell us, what are your big plans? None. I don't have big plans. That's not really how I roll. I've said before, I'm not someone who pursues the apex experience, the apex achievement. That is not what turns me on. What I'm much more interested in is achieving an equilibrium now, achieving a sense of balance now, achieving a sense of value and contentment and fulfillment now. And if that's invisible and anonymous, that's fine. I mean, fine. Maybe all the better in a way, because the pressure of interaction, the pressure of engagement with the outside world can be a very attritional element in the pursuit of this contentment I referred to. But that is what it is. That might not be something you relate to, and there could be all kinds of reasons that you might be scratching your head, going, no, this doesn't connect. But then again, it might, and you might be looking and kind of going, well, yeah, these are the reasons I feel a bit shaky or a bit vulnerable at the moment. And sometimes age is a factor. I mean, I'm pretty happy with where I am physically, health-wise. I'm not doing too badly for this time of my life. I've taken care of myself pretty well, and I look after myself, and health is important to me. And I feel, my wife would argue differently, but I feel I'm not obsessive about that, but it's just part of my routine and part of how I mind myself. And it's definitely a huge element in how I try to stay mentally healthy as well. Just a variety of different activities and exercise, and just moving the body to reposition the mind, moving the body to reposition the energy, and that continues to serve me well, and I see no reason not to do it. But to stay on the idea of age and how that might relate to vulnerability, I've been watching a show called Euphoria. I don't know if you're familiar with this show. It came out a few years ago. I think it came out in 2019. It's a show created by Sam Levinson, who's the son of Barry Levinson, the Hollywood director. He directed films like Diner, Rain Man, Good Morning Vietnam, and others. And so his son has followed his father into the business, and he had a much criticised and, in fact, like critically vilified show last year called The Idol, which I didn't watch. I think it was making very trashy headlines for its sexual explicitness, but critically, yeah, it was the critics just piled on. So, look, I have to reserve judgment until I see it, if I ever do. But Euphoria was another TV show that Sam Levinson created. I think it's had 2 or 3 seasons, and I've been watching that recently, and it basically is looking at the sex and drug lives of high school students in America. I can't think where it's set actually. Is it sort of Midwest? And Euphoria made a lot of headlines for explicit sex and violence and drug taking, and it is populated by a very kind of deep and talented cast of young actors, most notably Zendaya, from Dune fame and from The Greatest Showman. She's coming out later this year in a movie called Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino, if I did I pronounce his name right. Call Me By Your Name director, A Bigger Splash director. There's a director who's unafraid to go for it. So Zendaya is in it. She's one of the main characters and narrators and observers of this life. The Australian actor Jacob Elordi is in it also as a sort of prototypical American high school jock, a character with a very dark side. Zendaya is a recovering addict who is really, her character in it is a recovering addict who is struggling to let go of that lifestyle. An actress who I've heard a lot about, Sydney Sweeney, is also in it. And like she's been, I've heard her name dropped breathlessly in certain film podcasts I listen to, and how she has a certain je ne sais quoi, particularly as the epitome of female sexuality. I mean, yeah, grand. I think it's Bill Simmons from the Ringer network, and sometime presenter and host of The Rewatchables. He really seems to have a thing for her, and is, putting her in the same category as Sharon Stone, as kind of a generational talent of a certain type of female beauty and sexuality. I'm not convinced. I mean, she's young, she's attractive, she has a very particular body type, very voluptuous, and she's perfectly fine in the show. But I'd have to see more of what she can do as an actress to elevate her to Sharon Stone status. I think Sharon Stone was exceptional in terms of what she brought, just her energy and her charisma, and I'm not seeing that in Sydney Sweeney. Oh, Sydney Sweeney was in that rom-com that came out a little while ago. Is it Anyone But You? With Glenn Powell, who was seen in the Tom Cruise Top Gun sequel, Maverick. Sort of a charismatic, good-looking dude who seems to be a man of the moment as well. Anyway, the point I was going to make is there's nothing quite like looking at, you know, beautiful young people to make you go, oh yeah, right, okay, I'm not that. Maybe I never was that. For many of us, we certainly weren't that. But yeah, looking at very young, apparently very talented, beautiful young people, that's certainly going to, make you regard yourself somewhat differently. And of course, for me, as as an actor who never quite, managed the career that I would have loved for myself, it's always a little bit bittersweet. And in fact, I did hear some guys on the Big Picture podcast. They were discussing Dune 2 and assessing the younger members of that cast, and basically saying this is the new generation of big talent in Hollywood movies. And they were referencing Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet and Florence Pugh and Austin Butler, who played Elvis in the Baz Luhrmann Elvis movie. And yeah, I mean, what I find when I listen to some of those podcasts, and I've referenced them, often here on my pod, is that they can be very one-eyed in terms of their appreciation of American product and American movies and stars in American films. And I found myself just sort of scratching my head a bit going, yeah, obviously Timothée Chalamet is doing really well, and Florence Pugh, who is English unless I'm mistaken, is doing very well, and Zendaya is doing very well, and sure, Austin Butler is doing very well. But I don't, apart from Florence Pugh, I'd set her aside in a different category. I think she really has some serious acting chops. I just think she brings real weight and depth to anything she does, anything that I've seen her in. The others, to me, look like kids playing grown-ups. And there is a scene between Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet, about halfway through Dune 2, maybe earlier, where they're having, a deep, meaningful conversation. And I just thought this could be two high school kids sitting in the bleachers, having a chat, wearing their, normal 21st century clothes. And for me, it was notable that was what I thought. And that would definitely go against what the guys on the Big Picture podcast were talking about. These kind of generational talents. Now, that said, Zendaya in Euphoria is excellent. She's really, really good. She really gets to have fun, and she really gets to flex her acting muscles in a way that is actually not, that sounds like it could be very showy or over the top or scenery chewing. No, she really inhabits that character in a way that's very, very credible and very moving. And it's definitely the best thing I've seen her do. Now, in terms of dropping that series, Euphoria, I've only watched a few episodes, but in terms of dropping that into the vulnerability conversation, if you're a person of a certain age, and I might be that age, you might be that age, that show might terrify you, because you're looking at teenagers, young people from whatever, mid-teens to early 20s, behaving, I'm not looking at it this way, behaving in debauched wantonness and being absolutely, heedless of precautions and self-control. And I think if you were a parent of a certain age, which I am, and had a child of a certain age, which I don't yet, but the future awaits, that show could make you freak out and go, oh my God, is this the world that my child is walking into? And it is a world of ubiquitous wall-to-wall pornography and access to drugs and a complete dereliction of self-care and confused ideas about sexuality and sexual boundaries, and there's very little in the way of very little in the way of safety or protection or anything other than locking your child in a room that would prevent them being completely immersed in these cultural realities. That world is out there, and our good friend the internet has just been rocket fuel underneath everything that terrifies parents. But I just feel, it's always relative, and I think parents down through the years have always felt that way about the world that's out there. Within reason, there's always been things to be wary of and things to be afraid of and things to be fearful of. And parents are always vulnerable because you can't control what your children see and what your children do. At a certain point, you lose that control and you have to hand over that control to the child. My own working theory is I just try to keep the channels of dialogue open. Now, my daughter's only 10, and so this probably feels less relevant, but let's be very clear. This, she's only 2, 3, 4 years away from being exposed to some of the stuff I'm talking about, or some of the stuff that's portrayed in Euphoria. Now, Euphoria is extreme. Let's be very clear. It's extreme, and it's presenting things in a way that is meant to slap us in the face and meant to, grab us by our lapels and shake us. And it's meant to entertain us. And it is entertaining. And the acting is excellent. And it's notable also for a very visible and prominent trans character. And it just, it just feels like it's reflecting the times and reflecting the moment. And there's a diversity and an inclusivity and a sex positivity to it that I welcome and go, yeah, this is all good. But it's also presenting very confused and messed up young people who are, flirting, with the edge of disaster constantly. And certainly I don't look at that and go, yeah, I'd love my daughter to be involved in this. But no, my working theory is keep the channel of dialogue open. And with my daughter, my attitude is always there's no topic that's off limits. And I try not to stigmatize anything or load anything with too much emotion in terms of, a question she might ask or something she might be interested in. Now, my daughter and I watched AI the other night, the 2001 Steven Spielberg movie, which he took over from Stanley Kubrick after Stanley Kubrick passed away. It's such a bizarre movie. I'm not sure I'd seen it since I saw it when it first came out. It's tonally a very conflicted movie because it has all of Kubrick's darkness and cynicism and edge, but then it's got a lot of Spielberg's light and warmth and sentimentality, and it doesn't entirely hang together. But at the centre of it, you have this performance from Haley Joel Osment, which is simultaneously cute and endearing and absolutely repellent, because he's the little boy who isn't real, and very much wants the love of humans, and very much wants the love of his mother. And it's, you know, it's the Pinocchio story, and Pinocchio is referenced liberally and literally in the movie. And the tonal stuff that's dark it's genuinely dark. It's genuinely creepy. It's unsettling. It's a little bit confronting. And I knew my wife wasn't going to be thrilled about us watching it. So as we watched it, my wife was on the other side of the room having a look at a documentary on her tablet. And I was like, oh, okay, hope those earpods don't come out. When we first meet Gigolo Joe, as played by Jude Law, and he's propositioning his client in the most seductive and quite explicit terms. Not so explicit that my daughter fully understood what was being said. And yeah, but I was kind of squirming in my seat a bit, going, okay, I'll just wait. And then my wife took herself away to bed, and I was very relieved. And I was checking in with my daughter constantly, and ultimately she was quite captivated by the movie, and she said herself, she almost cried at the end. She doesn't generally get upset in movies. She gets upset if anything bad happens to animals, but otherwise not so much. And she did say at the very end of the movie, when the end of the movie takes place, I can't remember, is it 1,000 years after the main action of the movie, and humans have ceased to exist on planet Earth, and aliens find Haley Joel Osment David, and they give him his moment of fulfillment and happiness, and reunite him with an AI version of his mother, and he has one perfect day. And it works. It works. And my daughter said she nearly cried at that part. So yeah, that was that was nice. That was nice. Jude Law is excellent in that movie, by the way. So good. He's possibly never looked better as an AI gigolo, as basically a sex worker, and he just has a great agility and spryness that really lends itself so well to that role, and he becomes a good traveling companion for David. But a very like ultimately an odd and uneven and off kilter movie that doesn't entirely work, but then the things about it that do work really, really well. And of course it brings up things relating to vulnerability, because it's the rejected child who just wants to be loved and wants to bathe in the safety of that love. And I mean, that's definitely one of my obsessions, the idea of safety and safe relationships. Nothing is more important to me, and nothing is more important in terms of what I try to offer my daughter as her father. And I don't always succeed, because I'm not always being safe with my own reactions and responses to the various stresses I feel under, and the these kind of flashpoints on the parenting journey and within my home life. And that's something I constantly try to balance and counter and redress when that needs to be done. So look, I'm going to finish today by reading you something that I've just written. It's not this ongoing thing I'm working on, which I referred to last week, which is basically an attempt to capture my own inner life and inner journey that's kind of brought me to this point in time. But in keeping with the theme of vulnerability today, I'm going to read something I just wrote about taking part in a photo shoot. So Sharon Smith is a photographer. She has a photography business called Hippie and Bloom that she runs with her fellow photographer and business partner Bronwyn O'Brien. And Sharon has become more and more interested in portrait photography in recent years. She's done excellent work with these kind of body positive or body affirmative photo shoots with women, which are really, been a really strong series of photographs and photo shoots that she's done. And I've, often shared my responses to those. But Sharon reached out to me recently and just said, look, would you be interested in coming to take part in a photo shoot? More in the kind of conventional, headshot, sitting for a portrait style of shoot, which I've done many times in the past as an actor. Sharon is someone I've known for years. I'm friends with her husband Neville, her brother Russell, played football with those guys. I've acted with Russell. And so for me, it was like, a no-brainer. Someone wants to get me in a room and stick a camera in my face. And I was like, yeah, great, let's do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you something that I wrote. Basically, I was sort of inspired by my experience to just try and capture the experience. And I just finished writing this earlier today, and I thought it touches a little bit, not that directly, but it touches a little bit on the idea of vulnerability, and I just thought I'd share it with you. And when I finish reading this, I'll wrap up the episode, and it will be a little bit shorter than normal, but not that much as it happens. So I called this little piece The Shoot. The first thing that strikes me is the light. The purpose-built studio is not big, but it is distinctly bright and airy. The natural light fills it with soft illumination that instantly calms and draws the eye to the well-chosen furnishings that give the space just the right amount of character and colour. That colour is predominantly white, although my eye can be tricked into thinking it is ever so slightly blue, a welcome hint of nuanced shading that adds to the sense of attention being paid to every detail. The budding spring branches that hang in the garden are visible through the windows, and even they seem to be perfectly positioned and coloured to enhance my feeling of ease. Sharon was looking for subjects and asked me if I would consider sitting for her. I'd been an admirer of her photography for a while, especially her series of body-positive shots working with women. What I saw in those images was care, patience, thoughtfulness, and trust, and something very authentic and safe. That marked them out as exceptional. A camera lens can feel very invasive and aggressive, provoking instinctive reactions of defensiveness, anxiety, and even betrayal. Different indigenous peoples were certain the camera was a transgressive tool, something that stole their life force and spirit. In this age of prolific technology, we all carry cameras with us constantly, and so the potential for stealing images has never been more real. And our ability to be real in front of cameras has never been more conflicted. We wonder where the images will show up, on which platform they will land, and with whom they will be shared and to what end. So, what does it take, then, to offer oneself up to the lens? An honest exchange. Acceptance of where you're at. A willingness to be open and vulnerable. and trust that the image taker wants to capture you with something close to affection or love. Not of you personally, but of the exchange, the transaction. Sharon and I have known each other casually for quite a few years. I am friends with her brother and her husband, having acted with the former and played football with both. But sitting down to do the shoot was the most time we had spent together. I knew from the moment I sat down that it was going to be a good experience. The atmosphere in the studio was immediately inviting. Quiet, peaceful, easy on the eye. A playlist eased out of a speaker as I sipped the coffee Sharon had just handed me. Her calm enthusiasm was palpable as we shared ideas for the shoot. She showed me the work of photographers she admired and said that that was the direction she was leaning. I liked what she showed me and placed myself at her service. As an actor, I have done photo shoots many times over the years and had mixed experiences. Sometimes the failure to click with the photographer can affect the end product. Sometimes not being in the right frame of mind can scupper everyone's best efforts. Sometimes time pressure puts a squeeze on the whole process, and poses and faces and looks are forced and not quite right. Sometimes things are just off. Not this time. We had time. The energy, the tone was right. As asked, I'd brought a selection of my own clothes to wear, including an orange and black checked shirt that Sharon was sure wouldn't be used. As the person handing yourself over to someone else, you just want to feel you're in safe hands, because then you can relax, and that's when good things can happen. Once we started working, Sharon was fully in command of the session. She communicated effortlessly and was crystal clear about every beat of the shoot, and unafraid to share her delight and excitement when she felt she was capturing something she liked. The transitions from one look to the next were managed smoothly and confidently, changing a screen here, adjusting a light there, removing a scarf, putting on a different top, and always checking in to ensure all was well. We chatted as we shot, and she would stop me mid-flow because she saw something that she wanted to get. This is the eye. Pretty much anyone can pick up a good modern camera and stick it in someone's face and take an acceptable shot. But do they have an eye? Do they know what they're seeing? Do they know what they want to see? Sharon did. Sharon does. Except for the orange and black shirt. We wrapped up. "Are you not going to let me put on my favourite shirt?" I cheekily asked. She wasn't convinced, but being a good sport, she acquiesced and loved what she saw. "This is great," she laughed. We arranged to meet about a week later to see the shots Sharon has picked out. And I see myself as I am now in this moment in my life. And they are the best shots I have ever had taken of me. I recognise myself. And unlike the indigenous peoples of old, I see my life force and spirit intact. It has not been stolen. It is very much there. I see it because Sharon saw it. Okay, that's it. So, Sharon Smith, excellent work. Really nice shots. And if you're someone who gets my email newsletter, I'll throw one of the photographs in there. I might even throw one up on social media this week when I'm sticking up my stuff for the pod. So there you go. Okay, this is not the shortest episode I've ever done, but it's not crazy long either. I'm done. I'm gone. Listen, you can throw me some love on social media if you want. YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And if you enjoy this podcast, if you get something out of it, if you find it diverting, interesting, amusing, thought-provoking, whatever it might be, if you value what I do here, you can contribute financially. I know, there's that word. It's an ugly word, isn't it? But you can throw me some love using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. And for the price of a cup of coffee or half a sandwich or a bowl of soup, maybe not a bowl of soup, maybe half a bowl of soup, you can support what I do here on a monthly basis. And that would be great. I'd be really, really appreciative of that. And if you can't, no problem. You can just maybe spread the word, share a link to the podcast, tell a friend about it, and that's all really appreciated as well. Okay, thank you so much for listening. Take care, go easy, and don't be afraid to be vulnerable. It's just part of who we are, isn't it? It's just how we accommodate that and are accepting of it. That's going to contribute to how well we feel about it. But I think it's all good. Okay, I'll talk to you real soon. Take it easy. All the best. Bye.